Today we're going to continue the discussion about the genealogy of Jesus. Last time we discussed the genealogy that was in the book of Matthew. Today we're going to discuss the contradictions and differences between the book of Matthew's genealogy and the book of Luke. Luke has a completely different genealogy than Matthew, and they're supposed to be both coming from the line of Joseph. So we're going to find out where these differences are, why they are, and try to explain them, or try to find out how the church is explaining them. So we've already determined that the genealogy that's in Matthew, the Messiah could not come from that line. There was way too many mistakes in that genealogy, and Matthew had intentionally distorted the genealogy that's there in order to try to fit some sort of doctrine that he was trying to make up. So let's look at Luke now. I want you to turn to Luke chapter 3 and verse 31, and right there we already see a major mistake. This one mistake absolutely destroys this whole genealogy. So from this point on, chapter 3 verse 31, the rest of the genealogy is completely null and void from being part of the Messiah. So you don't even have to talk anymore. We don't have to discuss anything anymore. So look at the genealogy, you'll see that it's going from David, but it's going from his son Nathan, not his son Solomon. And as we learned before in 2 Samuel, it says that the genealogy has to go not only through David, but it has to go through his son Solomon, no other son. So as a recap, if we go into the book of 2 Samuel, if you turn to chapter 7 and you look at verse 12 and 13, what it says there is, when your days are complete and you will lie with your fathers, this is God speaking to David, I will rise up for you from your offspring, who will issue from your loins, and I will make his kingdom firm, and he shall build a temple for my sake, and I shall make firm the throne of his kingdom forever. So whatever son of David's going to build a temple, that's the son that the throne goes to. That was Solomon. So we see here in Luke chapter 3, verse 31, it's the son Nathan that this line is from. This is David and his son Nathan. So right there, the genealogy is over. You don't have to go any further than that. So this genealogy is completely worthless. But I want to point out a couple more glaring mistakes. Now obviously, from David to Joseph, both lines are going to be drastically different because they're coming from a different son. One's Solomon and one's Nathan. So the different names in these two genealogies does not surprise me. They should be different names. But what does surprise me is count the number of generations in both genealogies, but just from David on. Because everything from David prior up to Abraham, they're correct. Those two genealogies match up perfectly. But from David on, I want you to count for yourself the generations in these two lines. You're going to find out that in Luke, there are 15 extra generations in that line that are not in Luke. So they're both, and they both end up saying these lines are from Joseph. So these are both Joseph's lines. So first off, Joseph cannot have two different genealogies. He can only have one. That's the first problem we have. The second off is, how do you get 15 extra genealogies in one and from the other when they're both supposed to be ending off at the same man, Joseph? So if you look at a generation being a minimum of 20 years apart, maximum maybe 25, there's somewhere in that area, but let's go to the minimum of 20 years apart. So one genealogy is 300 years later than the other one. So the Joseph in Matthew died 300 years before the Joseph in Luke was around. They're a 300-year difference with 15 extra generations. So that's a major mistake or major problem. I don't know how they did that, and I don't know how no one caught that, but that's a serious problem. So how does the church rectify these two contradicting genealogies? So the interesting thing is, most Christian scholars try to claim that one of the genealogies is of Joseph and the other one is of Mary. But they don't say that. They're trying to claim something that the verse does not state. Both verses, or both chapters in both books, they both claim that these are genealogies of Joseph, not of Mary. So they're actually going against what their book says by saying it's from Mary. But let's go a little further, and could a genealogy go from Mary instead of from Joseph? So for that, all you have to do is turn to the book of Numbers. So now we're going to go into the Hebrew Scriptures, where all the laws and all of the requirements, all the Messiah's activities, what he's supposed to do, all that's in the Hebrew Scriptures, which is why the Christian book keeps referencing the Jewish Scriptures. So go to Numbers, chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 18. Now, this particular proof is in chapter 1 and in chapter 4, probably almost 24 times. But we're just going to go over this one verse, because this one verse is all you need. So what it says in Numbers, verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 18. And they assembled all the congregation on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees according to their families, according to their fathers' houses. So your genealogies go from your father, not your mother. And this, like I said, there are numerous verses right here in chapter 1. There's more verses in chapter 4 that say the exact same thing. Everyone's genealogy must go through the father. It never goes through the mother. The reason it doesn't go through the mother is because when a woman is born, she follows her father's tribe until she's married. God says when you marry, you have to separate from your father and mother, and you need to join your husband. So she immediately takes on the husband's tribal affiliation. And that's because the inheritance is passed down through tribes. So the mother has to follow through with her husband's tribe. So if she is born in one tribe, but then she marries into another tribe, she now reverts to the new tribe of her husband. But the fathers don't do that. The fathers stay in the tribe that they were born in through their father. So those lines are passed down through the fathers. So that excuse or apologetic that one's from Mary and one's from Joseph is ridiculous, to say the least. I don't know how a Christian scholar could say that if he's ever read the Scriptures at all, because it clearly says all over the Hebrew Scriptures that it always goes through the father. So whether Mary's born or came from the tribe of David from her father's side, it makes no difference. It doesn't matter, because it never goes through the mother. So and let's say that Luke's line is from Joseph. Well, this line in Luke is completely it's completely eliminated, just for the fact it's coming from the son Nathan instead of Solomon. So you see here that these two genealogies are completely different from each other. They can't be the same person. They can't go from the mother, because we already see that's not how it works. God says it has to go through the father. So both of these genealogies, they mean nothing. They absolutely mean nothing. So now we talked about this in the last video, that the Messiah is not discussed as far as a personal, like his personality traits, where he's born, any of that stuff. None of that's described about the Messiah. The only thing that's described about the Messiah is, one, he has to come from David, the line of David and the line of Solomon. But the most important thing is all of the things he has to accomplish. That's what tells you who the Messiah is. If he comes and he accomplishes all of these things, and they're listed in the prophets, then he is a candidate or he is the Messiah. So, what are those things? So, one of the most important things that the Messiah is supposed to do is he's supposed to bring world peace. So, we see these there's two main verses about the world peace that the Messiah is supposed to venture in. They're almost identical. So one is in Isaiah and the other one is in Micah. So in Isaiah chapter 2, in verse 4, it says, "He, the Messiah, will judge among the nations and will settle the arguments of many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and they will no longer study warfare." So we see here the Messiah is going to bring on world peace. That did not happen. In fact, what does Jesus say? Why he came? We look at Matthew chapter 10, verse 34. Jesus says himself, this is a quote right out of his mouth, "Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." Jesus came to bring war. He didn't come to bring peace. So you see, Jesus actually came to do the exact opposite that the true Messiah is supposed to do. So out of his own mouth, Jesus is saying, "I'm not the Messiah. I'm not interested in bringing peace. I'm interested in bringing war." So this is just another glaring proof that Jesus was not the Messiah. And the Christian book, the Christian church, and the Christian pastors and priests, all the people that preach this, they're intentionally lying. Because this book, you can see, is lying. There's no way that a preacher that is supposed to be a scholar, he's supposed to know the entire book, Hebrew book and the Christian book. There's no way he doesn't know these verses. There's no way that he doesn't know that there's problems with all this stuff. And that Jesus himself is doing exactly the opposite of what the Messiah is supposed to do. So you have to ask yourself, do I want to follow somebody that's lying to me and dragging me down a path that is not towards God, but is away from God? So the next video I'm going to do on the genealogy is going to focus on their claim of the virgin birth. Now normally that's a separate subject, but it is connected to this genealogy because they claim that there was a virgin birth, and that's why they say that Joseph was just the husband of Mary, which is the mother of Jesus. So they don't connect Jesus to these lines, which they themselves show you that those genealogies they give you, there's no reason for them to give them to you because they don't mean anything, because Jesus is not connected to them. So that's why I'm going to bring up, on the third video, I'm going to bring up the virgin birth claim, and we're going to go over that, and we're going to find out if that's a true claim, if that's what the Messiah is supposed to be, and we're going to find the verses in the Hebrew Scriptures and go over them together. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you on the next video.